So that's how the unpopularity comes from. In terms of internet, we've got IP, which is for wholesale. Moving on, I just want to share with you, this is public information. If you look at Fortress quarterly reports, this is where we derive some of this information. In terms of incoming traffic, Liquid Telecom has got slightly over 80 gig and is commanding 78% of the market. Other providers, they've got about 22, which is 21%. Total for Zimbabwe as we speak is 102 gig. And in terms of utilization of that capacity, Liquid is utilizing roughly 26 gig, which is 54% of the market, and other providers 2 gig. Now, what is interesting on that slide is that we are not even using the full capacity that we have as a country. That is also a good thing, because primary connections use some capacity, and connection is supposed to be good. Right, we also have got data centers. The connectivity that we are talking about is transmitting traffic and other content, right? And we need data storage services. As we speak, as Liquid Telecom, we've got a data center Eastgate. It's not as big as these ones. And floor space is 1,500 square meters. And we are in the process of scaling this one to 3,000 in terms of floor space. East Africa Data Center, this one is based in Nairobi, 2,000 in terms of office floor space and 5 megawatts of power. Joburg, we also have got a massive data center there, which is 3,000 square meters and 7 megawatts of power, which can actually... All these data centers, they are carrier neutral. They are carrier neutral. We don't segregate. Anyone who brings their connectivity there, we will serve them with the zeal that we deserve. I also want to share with the room that in terms of data centers in Zimbabwe, if you have got time, there's a very nice and well-equipped data center at Standemtan. I've been there. It is quite something else. Of course, you need permission from Mr. Nyambura to visit. Right. When we talk of high-speed network, because we are looking into the future, we are also working on a very, very robust and widespread LTE presence in Zimbabwe. And the speeds that we are going to be experiencing on LTE will be 100 meg per individual per device. And the base stations will be carrying a maximum of 600 megabits per second. DWDM, we are simply saying we need to prepare ourselves for unlimited capacity. Hopefully after the elections, all the abundance that we see in the papers is going to come in. And all the investors that we see being touted about in the TVs, they are going to come. So we are fully prepared for any eventuality. A high-speed network also needs a robust and resilient redundancy, so that should there be any disturbances, service will continuously be provided. And also, we need network capacity and topology that enhances the redundancy. Right. This is one of the most important slides that we have. And we are saying a network has to have a character. It has to be robust enough. It has to inspire and instill confidence on anyone who is using the network. So our network, as demonstrated here, has got the capability to peer both locally and internationally, which is a very, very key component of any network when you are in the telecom sector. Also, if you look at it closely, from the undersea cables right there, and all to be failed in terms of service provision. In terms of the core nodes, our core nodes and switching centers are at Willowbell and Pockets Hill. I'm sure most of us in here would know that. And also, we've got 610 POPs, or points of presence, in Zimbabwe, ready to service our clients and stakeholders. If your network is going to be high speed and reliable and robust, you also need support of the vendors that are reputable, that are not fly by night. And you also need the skill in terms of our own internal teams to make sure that the support is provided. We also provide a fully managed service. Why fully managed service? Because we don't want our clients to have the hassle of managing some of these things whilst we can. And it's very our clients. We offer a robust SLA. And should you need a single home connection or dual home connection, all that is at your service. We can provide that. Right. In terms of support and relationship with our clients, we also have an escalation matrix that is followed, and once issues reach to Edwin Sanyanga's desk, that will be too severe. And I'm happy to report that we haven't had a severe outage for the past what? I thought it was 3 years. It is actually 3 years. Okay, let me move on. What is it that we need to look at when we talk of data management? Before we even talk of data management, we need the connectivity, because it's an enabler of everything that we do with the data. So we need a robust data storage, that is the stewardship of the data. We've spoken about the data centers, they come in handy here. We also need data security in terms of inscription, and also physical security for the data when they are at the data centers. If you have visited any data center, you will find out it's not automatic that you get in and out. There's a lot of security that we have got to be checked so that we don't compromise the integrity of the data. Quality data is going to be stored, and also the security aspect ensures that the quality is there. Data access and analytics, I shall not overlap at that point because Dr. Abanyengo has spoken about it. And also we need data backup. Just to share with you, there's a point there on use of Microsoft Azure. We are now talking of data storage. Azure, we are talking of the cloud services under Microsoft, and Liquid Telecom is the official partner of Microsoft in Zimbabwe. So any service that we require, Edge did not disappear because they had our decision making as simple and precise as possible. If you look at the business intelligence that can be derived from that, it's huge. But like the doc said, it has to be done with integrity. If we look at the Cambridge Analytica scandal, technology is not bad. It is never bad. But it is the people who use optimization of systems, of chain. So if this is handled properly, you also find this way. Data, Internet of Things, and the desired path of every operator or business is to have increased productivity. And you can only have increased productivity when you are managing the data and information effectively and efficiently. So you also need improved efficiencies for your business, improved effectiveness, precise decision making, and if your market share grows, everyone is happy and the company grows. So I'm simply encouraging you to work on digital platforms, the cloud, and automation. What would be the derived benefits if this is done properly? You will have seamless customer experiences, detailed and informative operational analysis, informative operational analysis, informed data monitoring, data monetization as well. I think on data monetization, the future is going cloud, opened up as a revenue stream to say, and we can provide you that information, and it comes at a commercial rate. So this can be monetized to make sure that we create revenue. Precision marketing I've talked about, development of relevant products. Many a times we are behind because we develop products in the office without consulting them from that software. U2000, we are using this to monitor the performance of our network. All the 610 nodes are being monitored there. Critical nodes are being monitored there. So everything is supposed to be green. If anything is red, then we dispatch the teams to go and sort out such a point of presence. SolarWinds is a software for a client to be monitoring what their usage is. There is also Sandvine. We use this for shipping packages on our retail arm, and also to do some deep packet inspections when the need arises. ServiceNow is for faults tracking, and we also have got a portal for all our clients to log in and log in their faults. Right. I think in closing, what I would want to say is digital transformation.
He actually insisted right at the beginning that
say something. I think in terms of questions, one is here assisting each other.
Okay, I just want to add on to say, look, in terms of skills, the thrust in the past was to get electrical engineers and some of us. But the trend now, you now need computer science and software engineers. These boxes and whatever are now being driven through software. And as Liquid, we are now moving from the skills we want to those skills who can manage and change the software to whatever we require. And we have a shortage in terms of those skills, like what you were saying in terms of digital transformation. It's now more of programming, what can you get from the different things, as opposed to preparing for this one.
Thank you.
I would like to ask you, in terms of the data center, as a university like University of Zimbabwe, we have a lot of data, but we know we are funded by the government and fees for students, and we charge very low fees. I want to know how feasible is it for us to move our data to you, or our data to you.
That's a very nice, there is massive and humongous data there. In terms of transitioning it from wherever you are storing it to ourselves, it is 100% feasible. If you require that service, we are available to serve anytime.
What about the money side?
Commercials, I think Nena will be my witness. Commercials are based on a relationship. We are not in this game to make a once-off key and then go. No. Commercials, we can always sit down and negotiate. Remember, when we offer our services to the market, the rate that I give to Mr. Nyambo and Barclays is completely different from the rate that I give to education. Because as a responsible company and citizen, we also need commercials that are sympathetic to support the education agenda of Zimbabwe. So there you go, we can talk. Nena?
Maybe if I can also just come in there. I think one also needs to be comprehensive in analyzing cost. So it's also important to look at your total cost of ownership. So what does it currently cost you to capitalize the infrastructure to store your own data? And I think if I heard the professor correctly earlier, there's actually an opportunity to monetize that data. So it's an issue of perspective. So rather than looking at that data as a cost which you need to house somewhere, is there an opportunity
that can actually happen, if I may be allowed to use that? Let's say, for example, I'm already on provider X, right? I need to take certain consideration and advice in the unfortunate event that I have to migrate to another provider of a cloud. And that can mean re-engineering of quite a lot of the stuff. So what can I, before I get into such a decision, take into consideration with that in mind?
I think that's a fair question and a practical question. The head was supposed to be answering before. But I think it's very important to, before you consider any migration, what we usually do, even together with my colleagues like Mr. Nyako, because we don't want you to move from, we have had practical examples, as Liquid Telecom of that. So the other thing that you also need to look at is the cost, the commercials, right? You also need to look at the quality of service from all those providers. You also need to look at the footprint in terms of presence, in case you also want to grow into Gokwe or wherever you want to be. You need presence of any provider that will be signing on.
Yes.
maybe if I could just,
Sure.
and I think your question, I think, was also providing, you're also providing yourself your own answer. Other, embrace those from provider to provider.
And that assessment, you have to do it before you go in and commit to your first provider. You always have to, at times, think about possibility of you moving, whether you are moving because you need to move or because the other guy has remained static.
Right.
So that, because I mean, the cost of moving, if you haven't thought about it at the beginning, can actually be significant.
Okay, I think just to put some bit of fear, we are on Liquid and Zo and Tel1. So if he's thinking of moving, I think guys, there you are. What a customer wants to my question is basically on the data storage facilities.
A very, very difficult and simple question. Mr. Sanyanga, can you address that?
Look, in terms of, we are an enabler and we enable you to have those facilities. Like what you say in terms of that it should be an open source. We don't give you that, but we focus on maintaining that equipment for you. So we focus on what you're good at, then somebody will focus on those issues of storing.
Yeah, I think also to add to what Mr. Sanyanga has just mentioned, we also have got systems or tools that are then used for analysis. Your Dynamics and Power BI is some of the tools that you then can take advantage of and then start making different comparisons, analytics of the different information or data that you have. What we cannot do on your behalf is to do that on your data, because ensure the aspect of security is very critical. The aspect of access is also very critical. So we give you the tools to be able to interrogate your information to the best ability.
There are lots of. This one is a colleague, so I'll pass on him for now.
On the solutions, what's the ability of the software suite that you have to able to do self-learning and teaching and interrogating and giving you qualitative reports? Because BI, everyone can do BI with various tools that will then be able to do deeper mining of the data that is stored in the data warehouses, whatever, so that get real value.
I think like what the professor was saying, you need to have, depending on what you want, then you can have license to utilize that data. That's how it works. So you find what, I think we mentioned a number of systems which we use at Liquid, like Simplex. We don't host it.
There is a lot of deep learning and machine learning services which are there which you can make use of. So they also have a lot of resources in terms of the literature. I find something which can be useful. So it can...
Mine is just a request, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Martin. And we are excited that we have all this capacity in Zimbabwe, and we are hardly at 50% in terms of utilization. But we have needs. And my request is that your frontline teams that we deal with, when we explain to them that we are...
Thank Liquids. Can we give another round of applause, please? Thank you very much for bringing a team so that you managed to escape by very much for
that's in my mind.
Yeah, for some reason it wasn't picking it up.
No, he only told me like now.
Yeah. I can't grenade. Nobody turned it about. I said, I mean, because if I was slightly along the screen and up, supposed to start here. No.
So yours is gonna be 11 o'clock. That's perfect time.
11 o'clock.
Yeah.
Yeah, no prime time.
We'll be waking you up in prayers.
Please do.
Yeah. Sorry.
Catch a free image. Yeah, fine. No, you know, it looks like one of them was a temporary file, so I think it was closed prematurely. Okay, let's open it. Oh, yeah,
For now, I'll put my laptop.
I think that's it. Yeah, because I'll have stuff which will then be cut off at the top.
Can't we...
Right?
Let's
Also.
May I miss attention?
I think paper and already
But it will show this got up. And don't look by going down again. I'm going to go pizza up. tutor. Kabula. Zabed.
Quero ficar onde? Quero chefe. So the Bible is going to set up
Okay. Is there any way you can shrink the display?
Alright, let's solve the issue actually.
Gentlemen from High Life and from Chair 1. And then I'll come into electronic systems.
Very well.
It makes sense to us. It actually helps us to add value academically. So the next speaker is Mr. Nyakura. I have a temptation to call him professor.
You tried, because one of my desires has always been to lecture to the professor. But my talk. So I'm also realized that a lot of you might not know who Landem Tande is. Landem Tande is a licensed internet access provider. We're equally licensed, like Liquid, by the 6 different and concluded 6 transactions which saw us consolidating the market of all the smaller players that existed in the market. The amalgamations resulted in us being the largest business service provider in terms of the number of businesses that are serviced by an ISP. The current number, I think, is slightly over 3,000. I know that there are well more than 3,000 businesses in Zimbabwe, but I'm talking about the real businesses, the big guys. And to give you an example of the top 5 listed companies on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, the only one that's not a customer is digital disruption, because that's what you get if you fully embrace and you inculcate machine learning and other related technologies into your machine learning as to offer. And I must also confess, I Googled machine learning for the first time when I got the email from Dr. Abanyengwe, but I'm a very quick learner, so I will be speaking authoritatively. If I could have my first slide, please. I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with the iterations that we've gone through from an industrial standpoint, right from the synthesis of automation in the early 1800s, on the back of the steam, where we are. It's the revolution, or the second iteration of that, then benefited from what I'll call management science, where we organized ourselves, we created assembly plants, we were now producing things in mass, and equally in and around that time, disk space and the ability to store information became cheaper and more affordable, and certainly more pervasive within the communities. We saw the way that we did business change quite substantially. The fourth revolution is one that really scares me as a custodian of value. So the value I'm talking about specifically is the value of my shareholders. Because we've seen the cocktail of technologies that are listed there, your physical IoT, your big data and analytics, which is obviously part of the topic that we or changed or highlighted when they release the Q4 results. So something is happening. So if any of you in here are in the financial services sector, I'll be very worried. I'll be extremely worried about the trends that we're seeing. Now, what's equally interesting is, I'll just digress here a bit. Later I'll talk about the state of readiness of industry and the country to adopt machine learning and other technologies. You find that our business models are still outdated. If you and I go to any bank today, it's likely they'll hand us a printed form to initiate our relationship. I know if you come to Landem Tande, we'll give you a form to initiate your relationship. And I know because I'm Liquid's customer, when they came to acquire me as a customer, they gave me an even thicker package to initiate my relationship. So partially what I won't be talking about industry where we are, and certainly if you're driving policy, it's fully embracing digital, such that the way we do things, the way we interact with customers, the way we get feedback from customers, the way we interact with our supply chain partners, conforms to digital, behavior. If I could have the next slide. There's a study that was done by Citi Global Perspectives and Solutions, and in their digital disruption report of March 2016, was introduced and controlled about 45% of the market. Years after disruption is introduced into a particular industry, the top 3 participants control a top 3 who now is a wake-up call. So what we're saying is, as a business leader, And I think the same holds true for education as well, because you're in competition with the MITs and the Harvards and so on and so forth. To the extent that they can now reach more students using digital, they'll increase the uptake. So what this says to us is value is being destroyed and being created, guys, and they call us the digital predators. We are destroying billions to create millions. Because you and your server, using some cloud analytics, will disrupt Old Mutual. You bring down $1 billion empire to create your $1 million empire. And that is literally what is happening. So the key message here is disrupt or be disrupted. If we move on. They felt would pose a major advantage to businesses. They also identified those technologies which they thought would turn industries on their that relate to the conversations or discussions we're going to be having. Analysis. Spatial analysis. In fact, earlier, I think it was the VC who was speaking about GIS analysis. So spatial analytics is a branch of analysis on satellite imagery and so on and so forth. And then certainly, when we look at the 1 to 3 year horizon, and I think, in fact, you probably need to take a year off because this is a publication from last year. So within the next 2 years, insights platforms, and I think Martin touched on some of these things. So the technology we're talking about typically affects one of these, or in some instances, before you want it. If we're running with a solution for InScore, they run the done and dusted. They know what they're demanding. And one of the things that's another journey that we're quite interested in, it is what is their customer experience journey. We know there's the first time they're going to pay us. So why can't we anticipate the various things that they might encounter at the point they want to pay us? We know there's going to be the first time they ever call us when the service is impaired and they need to engage us to restore that service. Why can we not anticipate and better fashion the experience they have when we... I personally gave a few people a lot of TGSs that never went through either. But the straight-through processing ZipIt, the ability to fudge value immediately. And this is not just applicable in banking scenarios, it's also value chains, right? And being able to message and direct your value chain instantaneously. Whatever in a dark room where you're not generating any income. And then the other is obviously data decisions. So this is now coming a lot closer to home in terms of the conversations that we're going to be having today. We are faced with many alternatives. And I'll tell you, and it doesn't matter which leader you talk to locally, everything is by gut. What's in Zimbabwe to do this? And to what extent can we leverage the latent information in our environment to aid decision making? There's a project we did earlier this year for a related company. So Nandan Tande is part of the Masawara group. So that's your Minerva Advisory Services, Zimnat, Cresta Hotels, New World Property. So we own Joiner, we own River. So it's now equating to the 19,300. We're just a bit smarter. We're just and one of the projects we did is we stripped all the cameras that were in Joiner and we deployed new. The number of people that walk in, I think it was August, the last time I looked at the statistics, 600,000 entries into Joiner Center. And what we did is we deployed cameras that just count people and as they come in and they go out. One of the things we also did, we allowed them to reduce the manpower within the security staff complement within the complex. The standard guidelines for security stipulate that for a certain percentage of occupancy, you require a certain number of security. So I think within that environment, for every 15 percentage points of occupancy, you send a guy up from the call center. Oh, I'm now at 30%. You send another guy, and so on and so forth. The other is because where Joiner is, if you recollect a year or so ago, not this party that wears red, exercising democracy, but on occasion, the exuberant police force would then fire, necessarily as a result of people fleeing or the normal movement of people. So that's talking to the latent information that's in our environment. Because how many bank branches, how many of those same banks would benefit from being able to tell whether there are now 5 people in a queue and I should potentially allocate an additional, and so on and so forth. And then certainly new types of services. So the second slide, I showed varying types of new types of services. The ability of offering a taxi wherever a person is on demand, as an example in the case of Uber. And so this is so the expectation from an industry standpoint with respect to the technology and certainly the discussion that we've started talking about as an industry. And I must say that also as Dande, we're not taking our own medicine, because if you come into our environment, we wouldn't be able to, which is the biggest one in country, but certainly I think when you're now looking at from a Zimbabwe standpoint, it's very anemic in terms of the suppressed demand that exists for those types of services. Just doing data sitting in each of those Facebook data to manipulate. Why not exploit it to aid how they interface with customers in that CBZ app? But there are lots of businesses where if I'm buying insurance, I need to go to the insurance website. Lends to is a fragmented user experience. And again, you miss that opportunity of creating, remember we spoke about the customer, ubiquitous customer decision journeys and experience journeys. And so at the bottom there, it's use of APIs, Internet of Things, but certainly in where we are as Zimbabweans, if every business can just get an app, minimum. We're not even talking about the more sophisticated things that Dr. Panashe, where is he? He's probably downstairs. Now it's the feedback I gave him, because I think we go to the same church and we spend 30 minutes discussing AI after worshiping, and then what I posed to him was that the challenge is the paradigm in terms of how we operate our businesses is still 2 to 3 decades behind, and that it was necessary for us to work on cultural issues to sort of propel businesses forward to not only embrace but adopt these types of technologies. We as an internet service provider, and so there's the term there, omni-channel, and all it's talking to is having systems or technology. Called me yesterday. The guy who's now standing in front of me called me yesterday, and this is the conversation we had with him. We shouldn't have to force him to recount his story all over again. And this happens many, many times over in many environments. I think for the second time, let's move. And I think there was conversation around business intelligence. So that's the old school. The new school is what we are here to discuss today. And the other is okay.
He read beyond Wikipedia, I'm sure.
So I come back for my master's tomorrow. Okay. Okay. And then certainly the biggest thing for me is all of us mine over there. I'm sure if we tasked them to come up with a little app to quote and sell third-party insurance, there's no actuary work to do because it's statutory. It just says pay $40 or whatever it is, right? So why can't I do that with my Zipit? And hopefully you deliver in 48 hours. I've patented that model. and so what we are... There's another concept I read about McKinsey. Thank you for giving me this task because I then wound up reading a lot. And they were talking about boundaryless business models. Why can't a Zimbabwean company sell books in Brazil? Because Amazon is selling books here, right? And if you read brand, etc., and leverage the capacity that exists in terms of what Amazon have in their warehouses, their inventory. So how to respond? I think Martin had already touched on some of this, so it looks like great minds think alike. Or I prefer that imitation is the best form of flattery. So he was imitating me in advance. So we've got to digitally transform. And I think to my team it's a challenge. The next time we onboard a new employee, or the next time we sell to another customer, please, let's not administer our... Okay, so the last few slides are just to make Dr. Panyingwe happy.